Okay, we are recording.
All righty, I'll call this meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Bowling Green for the October 2nd meeting to order here. Jamie, do you want to call the roll, please?
Mr. Bhatti.
Yes.
Ms. Broadwell.
Here.
Ms. Ennis.
Here.
Mr. McComber.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Remus.
Here.
Ms. Sleek. Mr. Stalter. And Mr. Waddle.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the September 4th meeting. Those minutes were passed out to all the members of the commission with your packets ahead of time. Are there any corrections or additions or deletions to those minutes? Hearing none, then the minutes are approved as they were passed out to us. Next on the agenda is our lobby visitation. This is an opportunity for those of you in the audience, if you care to say anything to us tonight on some topic relating to the commission's work. This is your opportunity to do so before we consider the other items on our agenda tonight. Does anyone wish to address the commission? Please come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and tell us what you want to tell us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. My name is Michael Guest. I reside at 1808 Julie Marie Drive in Stonebrook, and I've lived there since August of 2020. I want to say that I'm very happy to see what's going on with our neighborhood and the fact that it is being developed. It's a positive thing for us and all the people that live there. So that progress means a lot to me. I do have one issue that I just like to make everyone aware of, and I'd like for this communication to be a part of a record of the meeting. There's a large mound of weeds and soil directly behind my home. It really originally was 3 existing mounds of soil that were there in the far northwest corner of the lot. It has been moved directly behind me and was as of January the 2nd of this year. The mound's approximately 70 feet long, 15 feet high, and it's 50 feet off my property line. And it's an eyesore. And I would like the Planning Commission's guidance and assistance with the cooperation of Mr. Beck and request that maybe we could get that thing removed and I could get some relief from it. It's a terrible thing to see every day when we sit in our sunroom and look out. Mm-hmm. So I would, if you're not the agency that can do that, then maybe you can help me and see who I might contact to get something done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I do have copies of this if you would like. I'll pass them to Jamie and she'll get everything to you. Can that work?
Do you want to keep one?
Was there anyone else that wanted to address the commission this evening? Okay, I will close lobby visitation. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which involves, first of all, a couple of items doing with subdivisions. We have the preliminary plan extension for Stonebrook Estates, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th editions located along South Mitchell Road. Heather, you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Sure. The Planning Commission last saw this preliminary plan in September of 2021. Soon thereafter, there were construction plans submitted. Work started later, as I believe there was an unexpected oil well discovered that needed capped, so that delayed a lot of the work. Mr. Beck is here if you want to ask him any questions specific to that. But this would be 13 single-family lots and 20 condominium lots. Those would have 0 side yard lot lines. Those waivers were approved also as part of your approval back in 2021. There were also waivers for the road links of Jessica Ann Drive and Dolly Drive to exceed the maximum that are within our Chapter 151 subdivision regulations. Otherwise, that's pretty much it as far as the general overview of the subdivision.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion among the members of the commission? Any questions you have for Heather? Seems pretty straightforward. Oops. Okay, so we will need to approve this final, what do we call it? Preliminary plan extension. No questions? Motion?
So move.
Okay, Judy moves that we approve the extension.
I'll second.
Mark seconds it. Jamie, you call the roll, please.
Ms. Broadwell,
Yes.
Ms. Ennis,
Yes.
Mr. McComber,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Remus,
Yes.
Mr. Waddle,
Yes.
and Mr. Body.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes by a 7-0 vote. Next, we have a final plat for the Stone Ridge subdivision, Plat 9, located at the end of Pine Valley. Heather, want to tell us anything about that one?
Sure. This is the final plat for Stone Ridge. This is Plat 9. This is approximately 8.3459 acres located at the end of Pine Valley Drive, which would be east of Mitchell Road. They are requesting that that area be subdivided into 21 parcels. The property is zoned R2 medium density residential, and the property owner does intend to construct one-unit dwellings. I do believe they even have 4 lots already under contract, ready to move forward. So they are eager to get this final plat approved and then move forward with the address assignment. As far as the subdivision regulations, I am required to provide a 2-fold certificate, which basically means that they have, they're complying with the preliminary drawing, and then second to that, they've provided the city with the required financial guarantee for any remaining work in the right-of-way, which in this case, most of the work is done. If you've driven out there, the roads are done, utilities are in. It's basically just the sidewalks and the right-of-way restoration. So we've collected that amount of $94,240, and that is returned upon completion of those items. Otherwise, that is it as far as my report, and I do believe Shane is here from Energy, Land, and Infrastructure if you have any questions about the project.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Anybody have any questions for Heather or Shane? Again, seems like a fairly routine matter. Okay, is there a motion to approve this particular final plat then?
So moved.
Judy?
Second.
Who was that? Oh, Julie.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, Julie was the second. Jamie, want to call the roll again, please?
Ms. Ennis,
Yes.
Mr. McComber,
Yes?
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Remus,
Yes.
Mr. Waddle,
Yes.
Mr. Body,
Yes.
and Ms. Broadwell.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have an interesting item involving the Historic Preservation Commission and possibly designating a portion of North Maple Street as a historic site. Heather, you want to talk to us about that? I guess I should say, first of all, we did have some discussion among ourselves about whether we would have a public hearing on this matter. The HPC has already had a public hearing, and City Council is required to have a public hearing. So we kind of thought it would be overkill to have a third public hearing. So we're going to discuss the matter, but we're not intending to have a public hearing. So with that, Heather, would you set the table for us?
Sure. Well, this is something that the Historic Preservation Commission has worked on for a long time. I would say probably at least 1.5 years. They've had interest in North Maple Street, not only because their chairperson of the HPC lives on North Maple, but as a commission, they saw a lot of value in that street. It's very historic as far as the people that have lived there, the homes that are remaining. And I gave you a bit of that history that they did a lot of research on. For this is our first I guess you'd say, potential local historic district out of the gate with our ordinance that was passed a few years ago. So they took a long time to really be cautious on, the packets that were sent to the owners that are required to basically have them fill out a survey. We gave you those results. It took a lot of time to gather all the property owner information, the parcel IDs, potentially impact the legal descriptions, the acreage, and again, compile those votes. And so we're at the point now where they were finally able to get to the, the survey, mail that required survey, gather those survey results, and then they created a frequently asked question sheet because we thought that was really important to homeowners to know what potentially you're getting into if you were designated as a local historic district. As part of this, why the Planning Commission is involved, not only is it in the ordinance, but this would be a zoning impact to the property because you would maintain your original zoning on your property. So if it's R1, low-density residential, it would add the historic overlay zone over that zoning. So obviously, the permitted uses, conditional uses, setbacks, et cetera, still would be there, but then this would add this additional layer of zoning to follow. And essentially, that's a certificate of appropriateness if you were going to do a major project to your home that would impact that front street view. You would have to request what's called a COA from the HPC, Historic Preservation Commission. So that's kind of a gist of what that would mean for either a individual designation or historic designation. So kind of a long story to give you some background on that. But so they did the required survey. It was posted in the paper. They had their public hearing, and they recommended that City Council approve basically the map that was part of your packet. During that process, they did remove 3 properties, and I would call them probably the more commercial properties along North Maple Street, which would be the city-owned facility, the Water and Sewer Division, Long's Cleaners, and then the salon right there on the corner of Conneaut and North Maple. So the map was slightly amended, really based on some comments, and then also they're concerned that they're really not contributing properties. However, for the record, they would say the city-owned facility does have a very rich history. City business was conducted there at some point in time, municipal court, council meetings, and before that it was even a factory, a few different types of factories. And but they felt like the actual structure wasn't necessarily contributing to the architecture or that era of that street. So again, they recommended that we approve this map and send it to council. Council is required to give it to the Planning Commission for your recommendation. You are not required to hold a public hearing, as Bob stated, but you could if you wanted to. Again, I agreed that it was a bit of overkill to already hold, to have 3 public hearings seemed like a lot. So I guess that's basically it, unless you have any specific questions. I tried to give you all the information that really we dealt with as far as, and created as far as the HPC. Again, the parcel numbers are really important. We tried to give you, if we knew the year the homes were built, we gave you that acreage, and then the survey responses. That's another thing we, kind of pivoted on a little bit. So we did the survey back in February, and again, I told you it took a lot of time to get to this point of having these documents and getting it, to the HPC. And since then, we had 2 owners that are new, so they weren't part of the original vote. And then we removed those 3 properties. So you'll see that I estimated we had basically 10 yeses as it stands, and then 3 noes or not in support, if you subtract, again, the 2 people that moved and then the 3 properties that were removed. So as part of the ordinance, we're required to do the survey, but it's not, it doesn't have to have, a 60% or a 51% vote. It's just we're required to do that.
Heather, I have a question. When the people sent back their surveys, those who were not in support, did they indicate why?
Mr. Waddle asked me that too. We really didn't have very many comments. I would say the only one that wrote on their form, they were just concerned with potential additional expense, not being able to do something with the property that they wanted to do. I would say that's kind of the biggest issue you hear from anybody when it comes to a HOA or deed restriction or any type of zoning regulation. I would stereotype it as a typical concern when it comes to historic preservation and having an ordinance.
Yeah, I don't want to read too much into it, but I thought that might be it, having to get the COA if they wanted to make any improvements. But it's more the front facing? Is
Yes.
that okay?
Anything that would potentially impact what we call the view corridor. So the back of your property, you can't see that from the street. That's not impacted if you were to add to the back of the home.
Heather, I know this is our first pass through all this stuff. Has there been any research or due diligence from other areas that have implemented these things to find out if there's a standard out there for these surveys if, like you said, 30% come back with I do not support or 50%? Do we have any metric for that kind of stuff or no?
No, there's really
Okay.
not a standard. And if I remember back to our planning commission time of reviewing this ordinance, we went back and forth a lot on, should it be 51%? How do you write that? Should it be 60? So there really isn't a standard. We even talked to the State Historic Preservation Office several times. And, at the end of the day, they say you can write your ordinance how you want to. They give you a model ordinance, but they don't, tell you really how you have to write your ordinance. So there really isn't a standard.
Okay.
And actually, originally, council had, I think we had in there that you had to have a majority voted yes, and then I believe council edited that to still do the survey, but not have to have a certain percent passage.
So we have language in the ordinance that says we have to send that survey out then?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and it could, Mark, we were talking to Heather and Bob and I before the meeting a little bit, that, you could look at it a couple different ways. How do you categorize those no responses? If you count those as no's, now you've got 10 yeses and 9 no's.
Yeah, there were 6 no's.
There
Or
were 6 no responses, yeah.
Yeah.
But another way to look at it would be they didn't respond, you just drop them out, they don't count in the number, and now you've got 10 and 3. So it's a little subjective as to how you view these.
And I'm not advocating either way. I was just trying to see if we have some
No, I
historical
understand.
or some other things that we can sort of use as a barometer as we start to do more of these and just to help us a little bit too. So, yeah.
I would add that as I looked into this issue more closely than I have in a long time, and particularly read the FAQ fact sheet, that I was left with very much with the impression that the Historic Preservation Committee and the city are trying to make this not onerous upon people. There's a lot of leeway to do a number of things where you don't need to get a certificate of appropriateness. That really only applies to major renovations on the front side of the structure for the most part. So I think the city and the HPC are trying to make this something that will not be a great burden to your average homeowner that might live in a potential district.
I thought the FAQ was extremely well done and answered a lot of questions that I had. So kudos to you and to the commission for going into such detail.
Thanks.
I do have a question, and this is just maybe for my own knowledge, and Mark can probably answer this. You said that there were 2 new families that came in and brought, now before they purchased their homes, would have been informed that this was, is that part of what you have to do if you're coming in, if you're purchasing a home in a historical district? You have to know that? So once they were totally surprised when they.
So there is, in our required property disclosures, there is a section that asks if your home is designated as a historical home. So there is a section there, and those are required by any seller to be filled out accurately by the seller. So there is a section in there.
Okay.
Yeah, for them to disclose that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's important because, I mean, in some situations, those requirements can be significant and pretty costly when it comes to repairs, new roofs, things like that. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So Heather, I have a follow-up question about that. Is there and I should have done my research, I just didn't have the time to do it. So, is there some kind of research around, is that is it biased, like having that designation to people who are may not have resources, like economic resources, maybe age, stuff like that. So, they probably have not invested on the property because of limitation of the resources. And now if we increase the paperwork to do so, that might actually negatively even impact them more because there is certain amount of time commitment to it. So is there some research around who benefits from this? Because I see that, there is an argument that it will not affect the house prices or it will increase the house prices. The assumption is that house prices of certain right? It's not $100,000 house. It should be $200,000, $300,000 house. Usually, right, there is an income to it. So I don't know if I'm going, I guess you get my question, right?
Sort of. It's kind of a loaded question
Well,
on a
okay,
lot
s-
of different avenues. I mean, I can tell you there's a lot of economic research on historic districts by actually one particular person, and I think he just did a newer study in a book last year. And really, we used his information when it came to the ordinance and writing it more so than where we're at now, trying to show people the benefit and how it's really helped increase property values on a lot of streets because if you don't maintain a home, say you maintain your home, but your neighbor doesn't, to a different character, I guess, than you do, then it would really bring down the property values. So they did a lot of research in a lot of other cities, too, and states, actually, how they've had a greater impact on property values and increasing them. As far as the question about, is there maybe tools or incentives to help people fix up their historic homes? Well, is that what you mean?
No. So, okay, so that was my question, but that also puts people pressure to sell their house, which they didn't because their house prices now jumps, right? So they were able to not afford the house or afford to fix the house. Now they see that their house has increased in the value because it's exotic. So does that put pressure on those house owners who did have resources to keep the house, to sell the house because they could get more money for their house? So in other words, does it gentrify the neighborhood?
I have not seen information on that. So that might be something to look more into. I'm not sure. I've seen in most cases, and I go to a lot of conferences and webinars, that people who buy these homes, they're looking for them. They know, I want a historic home. I'm looking for 1920s because I love that certain architecture. That's more of what we see. I mean, I'm sure I know there's gentrification in some of these areas that are more impacted, though, by other things, crime. Look at Toledo. I mean, they have some areas that used to be very beautiful historic areas, and unfortunately, they weren't maintained, and now, they're boarded up or there's been fires. And so I think in the bigger cities, we've seen more of the gentrification. But there's also very strong historic neighborhoods in Toledo, and they do have ordinances, but their ordinances are more specific to a neighborhood like Vistula District that has their very own commission, their very own set of regulations. So I think it's different in bigger cities, I think the impact almost, than it is in a smaller town like Bowling Green. But again, I'm not an expert in this. I've just learned a lot, with the research I've done on the ordinance and working with our commission and the different conferences that we attend.
Heather, I had another question and maybe just some clarification. When you sent a copy of the questions or the questionnaire, question 9 references a non-contributing property. So out of these 22 properties, can somebody say, I don't want to contribute, and what does that mean?
Okay, so non-contributing versus contributing properties are basically properties that the commission, and more so the two architects on the commission, walked North Maple Street. And, it's not scientific, right? A lot of this is subjective, that you can look at a house and see that all the siding's been replaced. It's now vinyl siding. Maybe the roof is no longer original. The windows are no longer original. They've taken off the beautiful grand porch that used to be there and replaced it with, a 3-season porch that's boxed in. So it's lost its architectural character. That is a non-contributing property. And that's partly why, I mentioned before, that they removed those 3 commercial buildings.
Yep.
They're not really contributing buildings. Those are non-contributing. Contributing are the homes that are still there or structures that have those historic features. I'm not saying they're 100% still, how they were built in 1889 or whatever year they were built. But they have the majority of those characteristics that were original, and those are contributing properties.
Okay.
So contributing properties are held to a bit of a higher standard than non-contributing because they've already replaced their roof, their siding, their windows, et cetera. I mean, they can still follow the guidelines, or they, being the commission, can tell them, well, I want you to do this or that, but the ordinance is written so you're more lenient with non-contributing properties than contributing.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or discussion?
One more.
Sure.
Is there a certain amount of are there similar lands, lot sizes and house values in the zone, or are there like varied in the sense people who maybe because there may be certain amount of bias, not bias, but a systematic thinking of I do not support based on the value of my house, right? So, like are they all consistent, like similar house value prices, or?
I have no idea. We didn't look at any of that. Mark might know better than I would, but we didn't look at any of that. They really were based on, again, the properties that are there now, how well-maintained they are, the rich history, if you read through the packet, of the people that have lived in a lot of those houses that have really contributed to the city. And that was more of their basis, looking at the 7 criteria that are in the Historic Preservation Ordinance and applying those to North Maple is what they looked at.
We do have information on the chart about the acreage involved with each property.
Yeah.
And they're relatively small lots, you can see as you look.
Yeah, I think there's a
down the
couple
list.
that are a little larger than normal,
Couple
but
little
some of
larger.
those have old alleys that were vacated, making them a little larger over time.
Yeah, a couple get up as much as about 4/10 of an acre. But more commonly, it's more like 2/10 of an acre. Okay. If there are any other comments or questions?
I appreciated all the information that we were given. It
Yeah.
was extremely valuable reading the history. It was like reading a history book. It was like, oh, this is pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody is not a native to Ohio or Bowling Green. I thought, this is really interesting.
Yeah, I learned a lot also. Well, I guess what we need then is a motion to, what we should vote on is a motion to send this to city council with a recommendation that they designate this as a historical district, as the HPC recommended.
I will make that motion.
Okay, Judy makes the motion. A second?
I'll second.
Bob seconds it. Jamie, you want to go down the list?
Mr. McComber,
Yes?
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Remus,
Yes.
Mr. Waddle,
Yes.
Mr. Bati,
No.
Ms. Broadwell,
Yes.
and Ms. Ennis.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-1. Besides the motorcycles going by. Next, we move on to the report from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Judy, you have something for us?
Mr. Chairman, I do not. We did not have an official meeting, but thanks to Heather, we did meet for a legal training session with Jeffrey, and Heather, help me say his last name. Jeffrey.
Stopar.
Huh? What?
Stopar.
Stopar, from Stopar and somebody else in Toledo, and he was extremely interesting, and we learned a lot. And the city attorney will be happy to know that none of us are illegal in what we're doing and saying, so it was a very informative meeting. And next Wednesday, we do have a zoning board meeting, but we only have one item that's on the agenda.
Okay,
And that, Mr. Chairman, is my report.
all righty, thank you, Judy. Heather, do you have anything else for us tonight?
Thank you.
Okay, so my usual here, permit update. So far this year, we've had 325 zoning permits applied for compared to 281 at this time last year. We've had 34 single-family housing starts compared to 27 at this time last year. We've had 2 commercial buildings so far this year compared to 3 at this time last year. We've had no multi-unit new construction, but we had 1 applied for last year. And we've had 1 industrial so far this year compared to no new construction for industrial last year. As far as permits issued since we've last met, commercial industrial. We issued an addition for Ohio Logistics at 134 Woodgate Drive, and new construction for a wing stop at 1502 East Wooster Street. That's at the corner of East Wooster and Mercer. So they would demolish that existing building and build this new building. So we think that will really be an enhancement for that corner. Permits currently under review or on hold. We have a lot. Quick Trip new construction. We actually just gave them comments, so they will have to revise their plans and get those back to us. We have Project Opidin, which is new construction at 2501 Woodstream. That's within the Woodstream Business Park. We also have new construction, a car wash applied for at 1111 North Main Street. That's just north of the old, or the former Buick Cronin building. Children's Resource Center, they've applied for a new construction of a building there at 1045, Klotz Road. Betco just applied for addition at 400 Van Camp Road. We also have a warehouse for new construction at Tin Man, which is at Bellard Business Park. And then literally after I did this report, we got two large projects. We got an addition to Day Spring Church that is pretty large, over 15,000 square feet. And then in addition to the Wood County Board of DD over on East Gypsy Lane Road. So as you can tell, that's a lot of large projects in our office to review and our other department heads to review. We also have the final plat for 2 St. Springs. If you've been in that area of Newton and Brim, you'll see they're hot and heavy on doing the construction there for this new subdivision, and they've want us to have their final plat reviewed and ready to go. So that will be in front of you once they get a little closer to paving the roads out there. They would like to have some lots already sold by the end of the year is what they tell us. We're still working on access management policies and guidelines update. Not much else in regards to any of those land use plan recommendations to really update you on. City Council does need to set a public hearing for those zoning code edits that you recommended from last month. Also, Historic Preservation Commission just held a public hearing on September 24th to designate 503 Buttonwood. That owner applied for that, so you'll see that probably fairly soon once council refers that back to you. And as Judy mentioned, the ZBA had a training, so I just wanted to let you know about that. That's it, unless you have any questions for me.
No questions for Heather? Anything else for the good of the order tonight?
Bob, I have a question. I have a question.
Yeah.
So Mr. Guest brought a question to us about are we the right people to be looking at this big mound of dirt? And what is the answer? Are we to look at that, or is there somewhere else we should be referring him, or?
My intention was to review the materials that he gave us for one
Okay.
thing, and then talk to Heather about just what the city can do, or just, if nothing else, request that Mr. Beck remove the mound of dirt. The cursory look at it looks to me like, yeah, it is an eyesore. He ought to be able to do something about that, I think, if he's motivated at all. And hopefully he'll, relatively voluntarily cooperate. I don't think we have a formal action as a planning commission to be able to do anything in particular.
I just thought we should give an answer as to if we are going to, if this is the right, because he was requesting, is this the right place to ask the question or not, so.
I think we can see that contact is made, and we do what the city has available to it to ask him to, get him to move the mound. I don't think there's a formal action of the planning commission to take place.
Okay.
Heather, you got any thoughts?
No, I think just as far as, weeds, we have in the police a civil enforcement officer that would deal with weeds and tall grass. We can ask him about that, but otherwise I'm not sure if there's anything really we can do physically with the mound unless somebody else within the city has any other suggestions. It's kind of hard when something's under construction too, and once that's done, I mean, I don't know the answer, but we can definitely check and see. And I need to read the materials too to see if there's anything else that comes to mind.
Okay, we'll have to proceed along those lines, I would think.
Okay.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, since Rose Drains is sitting there looking at me, to remind the commission members that on Saturday, October 12th, at the community center, there is a meeting that's going to, it starts at 3 o'clock, I believe.
Start 9:30.
9:30, thank you, and goes until 2 or 3.
2:30.
There's a continental breakfast and lunch provided to discuss the need for housing in Bowling Green.
Okay, thank you for reminding us of that. I know I plan to be there.
Thank you.
Is that it then? Well, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Judy seconded it. It passed 7-0.